Good afternoon, Slackomaniacs. This is Jack Slack here, your boy. It's Fights Gone By podcast episode 13, and we've actually got some fights to cover. I was worried that we wouldn't have after last week, but we do. There was a Glory event which snuck up on me, and I watched it, and it was hella neat. So we're going to be talking about that. And then there was a Bellator event which wasn't very good. But the upcoming Bellator events are very good, so we'll forgive them that. I got a message from the guy in Glory PR on Twitter the other day, because I tweeted so excited for these fights, and I had the posters for McGeary versus Davis, Bendo versus Chandler, and whatever other one I was excited about. Can't remember it off the top of my head now, so that's how excited I am for it. But no, I was genuinely excited for it, and I wanted people to see the fights, and so I put that up. And this Bellator PR guy tweeted me saying, "I'm surprised to see you saying this." I thought, what a bitchy thing to say. I do give them a hard time, but I'd give the UFC a hard time, and I'm going to give Glory a hard time in this episode, despite them putting on a good fight show. There is no one fight organisation that's doing everything right, and I'm sure that they know that. They don't think they're perfect, so we might as well talk about why things are going wrong or going well, or what they can do to improve business. But anyway, back to fights. I was really impressed by a lad called Israel Adesanya, a Nigerian guy by way of New Zealand. This was at Glory in the contender tournament. I think it was middleweight. And this guy fought twice that night and won both, and he won the tournament. But he really impressed me. And I looked at his record, and he's been around for a while. He's got like 60 fights as a kickboxer, undefeated in MMA. Fought in MMA like several months ago, and I'd never ever heard of him. The only reason I'd heard of him was because I did a pre-fight piece about the main event, and someone tagged this guy in and said, "Oh, watch out for Israel Adesanya," and he came in and said, "Yeah, watch out for me," and I was like, "Oh, I like this guy," so I looked out for him, and he was really good. Really impressed me. His first fight against Robert Thomas was just the perfect mark for him, because he just kept coming forward and trying to throw punches. Adesanya he's got this switch stancey style, but it's quite minimalist in what he actually does. It's all punches off the rear side, and what he's really looking for most of the time is the right straight from both stances. Not the jab from a southpaw stance, but what he'll do is he'll throw either his jab or when he's in his southpaw stance, his left straight out over the opponent's lead shoulder, so as if they'd slipped it. Sometimes he'll just put it there. And if you watch his fights, his left forearm is almost always on the side of his opponent's head or neck. And then he'll skip off to the right side into an orthodox stance and load up his right hand. And if you've watched any Floyd Mayweather or George Foreman, or I think James Toney did it a little bit, but Badr Hari especially did this a lot. When the opponent moves in to clinch or attack the body or something like that, you put the left forearm down the left side of their neck, and you just keep them off you. And if you step your right foot out to their right side, you can load up on that right hand and bring it in from a blind angle. And Badr Hari just murdered people with this. Floyd Mayweather did it a lot to Shane Mosley and Ricky Hatton, and just anyone who tried to sort of get in and brawl with him. But one of the interesting things that about Adesanya was that he was throwing out these jabs like as if he didn't want them to connect. He was throwing them over the shoulder just so that he could jam his left forearm in and skip off to the right side. And he did it from the southpaw stance too. He'd throw out like a lazy left straight, and then he'd skip out to his right side into the orthodox stance and throw the right hand. And he landed some real corkers. Had less luck with it in his second fight of the evening against Yuri Belgari. I think it's Belgari. It's a weird name, but on paper that is. But he had less luck against Belgari because Belgari was taller and kept his guard up and was looking to land clinch knees and things like that. Adesanya also had this really interesting, because he was fighting from a long stance, he had this really nice left high kick from his orthodox stance, which was like a skip-up karate style one rather than a switch kick or something like that, or a step-up one like you would normally see in kickboxing and Muay Thai. And he caught Ryan Thomas with one of those flush in the face, having thrown it a couple of rounds earlier, and I thought, that's a really cool kick, I hope he uses that again, and then he knocked him down with it. Yeah, he got a little bit, he went more aggressive in the second fight of the evening, because they were guys who knew each other and had a controversial decision a few months before, I think it was. But yeah, it just looked like, the first fight looked like someone who wasn't really prepared for that weird sort of style, and the second fight looked like he was fighting a guy who knew him. So he had to change up styles completely. He was a lot more aggressive in the second fight of the evening, and it didn't, that was a very close fight. But his first fight of the evening really blew me away. He looked incredible. I'll try and put some clips of that, especially the crossface skip out to right hand. I'll try and put some clips of that in the video version of this podcast. Elsewhere on the card, Simon Marcus took on Dustin Jacoby. This was a weird one, because Simon Marcus lost his middleweight title like a month ago, maybe less, at Glory 33, and Jason Wilness knocked him out. And it was Simon Marcus was like, it was an early stoppage, but he'd been knocked down twice in the round, and then a punch wobbled him, and the referee stepped in. So it wasn't really early. It was more that he didn't agree with the last knockdown. But Glory drew attention to this themselves. They were interviewing him beforehand, and they were like, "You got knocked out less than a month ago. How are you feeling?" And he was like, "I don't think it'll be a big deal." Not the sort of thing you want to be doing. If I were someone in Simon Marcus's camp, I would be saying, take some time off. Certainly don't do any heavy sparring within a while of being knocked out, I would say. They give you medical suspensions for that stuff in most states, for MMA at least. Well, I say most states, the ones that matter, Nevada. But yes, it was very interesting to see Simon Marcus back in action so quickly, and he did get clipped with a couple of big right hands. It's weird because a little while ago we were talking about how slick his shoulder roll was looking, and in his last two fights he's just been there for the right hand. He's like been trying to dodge it but still getting clipped while he's leaning or ducking. But about midway through that first round, he uncorked actually, no, I think it was about a minute left. Yeah, he uncorked a right body kick, which hit Dustin Jacoby in the left arm. And visibly, Dustin Jacoby stopped doing stuff with his left arm. He had been, double and triple jabbing. And while it didn't look like it was going to hurt Simon Marcus, it made it really difficult for Marcus to step in. He just kept trying to parry the jab and didn't really know how to step in on his man. But yeah, Jacoby was forced out of the fight because... in the corner they just said clearly your arm's dangling, what's up, and clearly it was broken, so they had to call it off. Just a reminder that Marcus kicks really hard, and he landed some awesome clinch knees right at the end of that round, which I think might have been illegal, but yeah, I think double collar tie knees in Glory are illegal, and he held on to the double collar tie for about 3 knees, but it looked like if they'd let him keep doing that, he'd have put Jacoby away if the bell hadn't saved him. If you remember his fight with Joe Schilling, that was the one where he put him down with a knee to the body from the clinch, and it was just brutal. Didn't even look like much. He just hit him at the right time in the right place and sent him down. But he's really been improving his outfighting game, because in Muay Thai he was really strong from the clinch. And then in the Glory rematch with Schilling, he had real trouble out in the open. But he has been improving. I really don't like fighting that close back-to-back when you've been knocked out, though, because he's been taking the shots in training too. Then there was the weird matchmaking. Tong Chai, can't say his second name, Thai guy, got 150-something fights, fighting Casey Green, who has nowhere near that many fights. Casey Green looked really uncomfortable all the way through, ate a right hand, I think it was in the second round, did the chicken dance, a really exaggerated one. He was leaping around trying to stay on balance, and finally fell down. Referee counts for him, starts doing the 10 count, and... he says, "Put your gloves up, walk towards me," and the guy just stumbles all over himself walking towards him. And the ref lets him keep fighting, and he gets properly laid out. Glory apparently gets through a lot of referees. I don't know if this was just different referees because Denver Commission made them have these referees or something like that. But I was talking to Lawrence Kenshin, who does some work with franchise people and stuff like that. And he was saying that, you remember in Saenchai's fight... Saenchai was just putting on a clinic against this guy, looking beautiful, and he catches one too many kicks out of instinct, and the ref docks him a point, and Saenchai won by a very thin margin in that fight, and apparently Glory sacked that ref almost immediately afterwards. Take that with a grain of salt. It's a rumour, but I haven't seen that guy since. But it seems like there's always some reffing or judging problem going on in Glory. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's continue with the fights. Robin van Roosmalen versus Gabriel Varga. I love Gabriel Varga. I respect Robin van Roosmalen a lot, but if there was a guy whose style I really didn't enjoy watching, it'd be Robin van Roosmalen. Because he puts on the earmuffs, and that's his entire defense, and then he walks through the punches and tries to land the combinations in close and the pounding low kicks. And when he's getting his combinations off, he looks great. But the trouble he has had is with guys who actually know how to use ringcraft and push away, tie up, and just do all those things that aren't letting him stand in fighting range with them rather. So Sitachai was pounding his body with knees and round kicks, and then pushing him away or clinching up when he got too close. And if you want to see an absolute masterclass in how to deal with the pressure fighting brawler, check out Giorgio Petrosian's performance against Rusmalen, because that is just I think I wrote a whole article based on that piece. It was called Giorgio Petrosian and the Defense to All Strikes. And it just, like, in that fight, Petrosian, he ties up, he pivots off, he pushes Van Roosmalen away, meets him with knees whenever he comes in. And it was just a constant case of him pounding Van Roosmalen's body when he stepped in too aggressively, chopping away at his legs when he stayed out in the open, hitting him with teeps and things to keep him at distance. And it was beautiful. Gabriel Varga, meanwhile, more of a traditional kickboxy, karate, taekwondo-y sort of stylist, who took to kickboxing. It looks like, at least. Not all that comfortable with the tying up and the boxing and the footwork and stuff. So he opens Van Roosmalen's face up really early with jabs, because Van Roosmalen's entire defense is to put up the earmuffs and not move his head. But he just doesn't move his feet enough, Gabriel Varga, and eventually Van Roosmalen's closing the distance, pounding in the low kicks, landing the body shots. What I really would have liked to see from Varga was he was throwing a lot of teeps to the face, or push kicks. I would have liked to see some front snap kicks to the face. The difference being a push kick or a teep chambers high. You bring the knee up high and then you push it out. A snap kick chambers low, so you pull your heel up to your ass as you're bringing the knee up and then you swing it out. And those were one of the few strikes that Van Roosmalen actively dodged, because Varga's knee came up and then Van Roosmalen knew, oh, got to be out of the way for this one. Whereas if the knee had been coming up through the blind angle and the kick had been going ahead of the knee, he'd have been probably catching Van Roosmalen with those. But Van Roosmalen did a great performance. The low kicks he was throwing were absolutely brutal. He's the poster boy for Dutch infighting to low kicks. Just uppercut, left hook, right low kick, or left hook, right low kick. Just does these combinations really fast. And he looked really comfortable at that weight. He looked stocky, but still was giving up height to Varga. I met Varga at Glory, I think it was 8 in Tokyo, just briefly. But he seemed like the most Canadian guy you've ever met. And in this fight, it showed even more. He gets knocked down at the start of the second round. He gets up, and he's clearly with it still. And he looks the referee, he spits out a piece of his tooth, and he looks the referee in the eye and he goes, I forgot my mouth shield. What should I do? The referee's like, shit, get it back in. But it's just really funny that he was asking permission to get his mouth shield back when other people would be like, oh, I'm fine. It was like he was worried to get into trouble at school. Yeah, I mean, a rough loss for Varga. He's benefited a bit from the disappearance of Yuta Kubo, who was the sort of top, are they featherweights? Yeah, top featherweight in Glory. And Masaki Noiri, who is a brilliant fighter. He appeared in one of my 4 fighters you should know, outside of MMA or whatever it was, pieces. He's brilliant. He's got these knee strikes that come in from almost over the guy's guard. He can throw high knees from standing or hopping, and he'll arc them in. Glory 8 in Tokyo again, I was watching Liam Harrison, who is dear to my heart because he's a terrific English Thai boxer. And Harrison's doing well against him. He's landing body shots and stuff. And then Noiri just steps in, brings up this knee, and it slices all, it's no grips at all. He just brings up this knee, slices all the underside of Liam Harrison's eyebrow open, and there's just blood pouring out. And they stopped the fight instantly. They were like, that is the worst possible cut. And he's just opened it with one strike. No grips, no forcing it. He just stepped in and did it. Really, razor sharp knees on this lad. Technique, that is. But they are also probably quite pointy. Anyway, so Varga's last real loss was to Yuta Kubo. Oh, I tell a lie. He actually lost to Serhili Adamchuk, apparently, at Glory 25. But Yuta Kubo not in the division anymore. Masaki Noiri, he never got around to fighting him, not in the division anymore. So it was more like a lot of talent left that division. And then Varga was the champion. And that's not me shitting on Varga, that's me saying it's important to get these sort of things in, these losses or struggling performances against really high-level guys. And Van Roosmalen, I mean, as much as I said I don't enjoy his style personally, I'm not going to argue that he's not a really high-level kickboxer, because he's been in with, some of the greats. He's been in with Sitichai. Some people thought that he maybe deserved the second match against Sitichai, when they sort of did the do-over because the decision was so bad in the first one. But he's been in with Risti. He beat Risti. He's been in with Kyria, Gregorian, who was the K1 champion for a while. He's been in with Groenhart, who we're going to talk about in a minute, with Giorgio Petrosian, obviously. So, that guy's just faced a murderer's row. And it's good for Varga, who doesn't really have nearly as much experience. What has he got? 13 fights? 13 wins, 4 losses. Whereas Robin Van Roosmalen has 66 fights. So it's important to get that stuff in. And he got beaten up, but he didn't get, put through the meat grinder for 25 minutes or something like that. It's not going to hurt his career in the long term, I don't think. Right, what else happened? Oh, and then, of course, there was the main event between Nicky Holzken and Myrtle Groenhart. I wrote an article about this in the week, sort of talking about their last fight. That was a really good fight because Groenhart... Firstly, Nicky Holzken has been, the perfect pressure fighter in kickboxing recently. He'll walk guys down and he'll just pour on the combinations, normally get that left hook into the liver at some point, and just melt guys. But Groenhart was longer than him, a little bit taller than him, moved well, and what he was doing was, he'd run around the ring and Holzken would step in. He'd step in to meet him with a left hook to the body and maybe a right low kick or a left low kick, and then he'd step out the side door, and then Holzken would turn to face him and he'd jab him on the way in. So it was jab every time Holzken stepped towards him, and then hit him with the body shot when he got too close to the ropes and angle off. And it was a really nice performance, and it messed with Holzken something awful. I think, in my humble opinion, Groenhart probably should have won that second fight. Well, it was the second fight they've had, but it was the first fight in Glory. I think Groenhart should have won that. This fight, a completely different Holzken turned up. Kiki Holzken, as I like to call him. Basically, he looked at the film of the first fight when we were all going, when he changes to the southpaw stance and kicks him in the leg, he really hurts Groenhart. Why is he not doing that more? And this fight was all kicks from Nicky Holzken. And it was an interesting reminder that this guy can do that. He's been knocking guys out with these beautiful combinations of punches and knees. But he is a world-class kickboxer, and he can kick pretty well. So by the fourth round, I think he'd landed almost 50 low kicks. And he was just doing excellent work. They were saying that his ankle was giving out. He had one heavily taped up ankle in those awesome neon yellow colours that they use for his t-shirts. Had one heavily taped ankle. And if I had to guess, I'd say he's probably kicked an elbow at some point or something like that and knackered it. Because he was doing so much kicking in this fight. I assume it was a very kicking-centric camp. Or he could have turned it at some point. But he had one taped up ankle, and every time in the fourth round, I think it was, about the fourth round, maybe started in the third round, Holzken was slowing down with his kicks, and Groenhart was starting to grab them, catch them and throw punches back, which that referee from the Sangchai fight penalised him for, but which other referees seem to be letting you do. But there was an interesting use of what, back in Mendoza, who we're going to be talking about in episode 2 of the History podcast, Mendoza's day, they used to call it dropping, which was because you got 30 seconds to come up to the mark in bare knuckle days after you were dropped, and there were infinite rounds. If you felt like you were in trouble, you'd just take a knee. But what Holzken was doing was he'd get his leg caught, and then he'd go, oh shit, I'm about to get hit, and he'd just fall to the floor. So there was one where Groenhart actually kneed him on the way down, and the referee stopped it and said that was an illegal knee. And Holzken was like, I'm fine, don't worry. And then the fifth round was pretty much all Groenhart. He went on the offensive, and he was doing the Nicky Holzken bit with the pressure, but a bit more wild because he likes to flail a lot. Really not that polished an infighter, Groenhart, but very good on the offensive, aggressive. Aggression-wise, he's very scary. Throwing that Groenhart knee, the nice fake right kick, jump into the left knee, the Jose Aldo special. But yeah, Groenhart used to open every fight with that. Holzken only really got a few of his setups in. Very few punches to the head from Holzken, or kicks even. He did land a lovely inside low kick to right uppercut, which was a combination he was using against Congolo on the inside, and I loved it. Because if you hit the inside low kick and knocked the opponent's lead leg outwards, they're going to bend forward at the waist, so it worked beautifully. Great fight. I think Holzken did deserve the decision this time. And to me, it sort of signified an important change in Hulskin. You know, he had to do something different. He had to adjust for the rematch. You know, the other rematch that he had recently was against Raymond Daniels, and that was one where he dominated the first fight and didn't need to make any changes, and Daniels made the changes, and Hulskin struggled as a result. But this time around, it was Hulskin making the changes and having to fight a bit more intelligently, or, you know, change up his strategy. And it also helps that he grew this beard, but I was just looking at him going like, yeah, that's a savvy veteran. Because previously I've always just like, you know, when in your head you're like, oh, this kid is great, he's something special, you should watch him. And you're talking about like a 30-year-old fighter. I was having that with him, and he's 32, so, you know, he's been in this sport a long time. But yeah, just to me, this was like the performance where I started thinking of him as the savvy vet rather than the wunderkind. So all in all, I thought that was a really good event for Glory. The really sad part was that people were sending me photos from the event, and there were like 400 people there by the main event time. Yeah, and then of course there were very few knockouts. I think there was like one or two. Well, if you include the Jacoby one and the Robin van Roosmalen one. Oh, and the Tongchai one. So there's about 3 knockouts, but not a lot of knockouts on a long card. And the way to do this, to fix this, and I'll keep saying this, and I really hope Glory actually does something like this, or just tries it for one event, is to switch to 5-minute rounds, have 3 5-minute rounds. Because at the moment we're 3 3-minute rounds, which is 9 minutes. You know, that's almost half of the 15 minutes you get in MMA. And combat sports are supposed to be like grueling endurance sports. It's the last 2 minutes of every round that are the hard ones. Especially the whole last round is a nightmare if you've just fought 10 minutes previous to that in 2 rounds. So if you want more knockouts or more finishes, make the rounds longer. Go for 5 minutes instead of 3. You could easily salvage the time from not doing so much patter between the fights or having shorter entrances and things like that. Or just taking off some of the undercard fights that people don't really care about. I mean, when they did Last Man Standing, they had this random fight in the middle of the card that was like random army kickboxer versus random navy kickboxer. And you're just like, why is this here when this card, Last Man Standing, is... I maintain that Last Man Standing was one of the greatest events I've ever seen. And reportedly like 6,000 people bought it. So yeah, it just shows you can have an amazing product, but if you're not doing the right things with it, you know, you can lose a lot of interest, or not even gather the interest to begin with. So 5-minute rounds, please, Glory, if you're listening. Just for one event. See what happens. It'd be terrific, I reckon. And if it's not, I'll apologise. Anyway, what else happened this weekend? Bellator 162, which was... You might as well have subtitled this the most Bellator card ever. Firstly, Kimbo Slice Jr., Kevin Ferguson Jr., whatever you want to call him. Kimbo Slice Jr. was scheduled to debut on this card, but his opponent came in so far overweight they had to cancel the fight. Then you had Hisaki Kato versus AJ Matthews in a really sloppy brawl, which Kato won with a knockout. It was quite cool, but not particularly impressive on his part. And AJ Matthews had the worst hair I've ever seen inside the cage, including Vitor's messes. He had that Rico Verhoeven like parted mohawk thing where you get only the top of your head has hair on it, but you have like the floppy bit. And Verhoeven pulls it off, firstly because he's a 260-pound badass, but also he's a pretty good-looking lad. Whereas this guy's hair just looked dreadful. But yeah, I mean, it was a decently entertaining fight, but it was very sloppy. Then you had Bobby Lashley versus Josh Appelt. I wanted to say Bobby Lashley versus guy they found at bus station, but Josh Appelt has a decent record, 12-5. It was just standard Lashley match. Pick up some guy he can take down easily, and he'll get on top of them, and he'll wheeze and huff and puff, and then eventually the ref will stop it. Yeah, Lashley is a warning of what could happen with Michael Page if they continued giving him like the favourable matchups. Lashley came in at like 32 or something like that 8 years ago. 8 years, and he's still not fought anyone better than Chad Graves, because Chad Graves knocked him out. Sorry, Chad Griggs, Chad the Grave Digger Griggs, which should have been a learning experience, because the Grave Digger, he only won that fight because Lashley was gassed. And that would have been an important learning experience if they hadn't just then gone, okay, Lashley, fight nobodies again. So that was jank. And then in the main event, you had Kendall Grove versus Alexander Shlemenko. Kendall Grove is small-time promoter's dream fighter because he finishes plenty of fights. He's got like 17 submissions and 8 KOs or something like that. He's been knocked out 8 times. So he's also got a bit of a suspect chin. So he's going to finish or be finished. He's an entertaining guy. Alex Shlemenko is back off of his suspension. He got caught for something in California. One of the few states that Bellator goes to that might actually catch you for something. But they gave him a ridiculous suspension and he appealed it and finally got it overturned. Good to see him back. Fight was okay, I guess. There was a cool moment where Shlemenko did a sort of beckoned Kendall Grove towards him and then walked across himself, Jersey Joe Walcott or Emmanuel Newton, who I can't believe they just cut, Emmanuel Newton style, where you're walking around the cage with your feet crossing, like you're going for a stroll. And as Kendall Grove stepped in on him, he turned into the back fist and hit him across the face, exactly like Emmanuel Newton did to Joey Beltran. So that was terrific. And then the knockout came with I think it was a left hand to the body and right hook to the head, or the other way around, as Kendall Grove stepped in. And it looked like he was knocked down on the punch to the head, but he was clutching his body as he did it, so it was quite neat. Something cool about Kendall Grove in that fight, he got knocked on his ass in the first round, and he immediately tucked his knees up to his chest and got his hips off the mat when Shlemenko came close enough to like diving punch through his guard. And that's like the Keenan Cornelius thing where you tuck up and you the guy can't do anything without engaging you first, whereas a lot of guys will start kicking away immediately and stretching their leg out, and then that's when you see those guys come away holding one ankle and then they'll just throw it and dive in with the punch. So it was good to see Kendall Grove showing some neat guard in his guard. Tried it the second time round, but he was out of it. Yeah, not a great fight, not a great event, but I'm not going to shit on it too much because it wasn't wasn't one of their tent poles, as Scott Coker would call it. But they got some really good cards coming up soon, so we will be doing previews of all that stuff. And we've got McGeary versus Davis, which I'm so excited for. Liam McGeary is the sole beacon of excitement for me at light heavyweight at the moment, because the UFC's division is burning down in flames at the moment. Poor old Alexander Gustafsson has just been put out indefinitely with a back injury. John Jones looks like he's going to get off for the tainted supplements thing. That whole thing, just if you're an athlete, you should know what's going into your body. So can we just give real suspensions for tainted supplements? Because how much can your supplements actually be needed if you're if you're one of the best in the world ever? It's like when you watch back at the, I can't remember what it was called, but that series where they went and visited UFC fighters, and they visit Sean Shirk when he was the champion, just before he got popped for drugs, and he makes a point of showing how many supplements he takes every day. Getting off topic now, let's do some questions. Hello Jack, you're quite good at podcasting. Oh, thank you. You've given us a list of martial arts books you read to learn their sick moves. Do you have a list of martial arts books that are more interesting from a historical perspective than an instructional one, like the Babishi? Books that are largely obsolete or bullshit or contain no technique that are interesting anyway. Also, I love it when you talk about crazy old Japanese karate dudes. Please do a history episode about them. Thank you, from Eddie. And then there was also a question that said, hey Jack, I really enjoy your reading suggestions and was wondering if you could recommend some books on traditional martial arts like karate, aikido, etc. From Ryan. So we'll start with, I suppose, random, historically instructional bullshit ones. The Babishi is great, mainly because Patrick McCarthy has put together an amazing copy of it, or version of it rather, which has a ton of essays about the historical significance of certain things. The Babishi itself is not particularly interesting, except for the self-defense diagrams in the back. It's mainly McCarthy's interpretations and research that make it interesting. However, I was really disappointed to find out that the newest publication of the Babishi, which I do need to buy, has a foreword by Evan Pantazi, who, if you've watched my Wushu Watch video about Kyushu, the pressure point bullshit, he's that guy. So Patrick McCarthy, who I respect enormously, got this guy to do the foreword about chi points and shit like that. Just weird choice, but whatever. I'd have written him a foreword for free, just saying this is an amazing piece of historical work. If you like your historical martial arts texts, there's a book called Secret Tactics by Kazumi Tabata or something like that. What's his name? Hold on. Yes, nailed it first time. Kazumi Tabata, Secret Tactics. Just a selection of like translated extracts from other martial arts texts that are much, much older. Obviously, the Book of Five Rings. Read that, or if you're lazy, read my 2 articles about it. That's the one that they make you read in business school. Very profound stuff by an amazing duelist. Musashi famously fought his way through Japan, taking on all sorts of other martial arts masters and cutting them down where they stood. Machiavelli's The Prince is sometimes considered a martial arts text, just brilliant. Might be satire, depending on who you want to believe. Anything by Machiavelli is pretty good, to be honest. High praise, Jack. You can put that on Machiavelli's Wikipedia page. Jack Slack said he's quite good. I like Bruce Lee's Fighting Method, those 4 little books, or you can now get them in a big book, because while the specific techniques aren't always spot on or interesting, the concepts are always interesting. I quite like The Little Book of Violence by Kane and Wilder, which is about sort of street defense stuff. More about like why those things happen. There's a couple of great books called Fighting Karate by Hideyuki Ashihara, founder of Ashihara Karate. Not the same as the study that I made called Fighting Karate, but pretty good nonetheless. And a book that's sort of a rip-off of those two, The Sabaki Method, which is also excellent. I say rip-off, it's like a better version, basically. One that I really like, which is more sort of like a crazy guy's ramblings, is a book called Shotokan's Secret, which discusses sort of the origins of Shotokan karate, specifically, but mainly like Okinawa days, which is pre-Shotokan. And it has all these theories about how real karate was built for bodyguarding, because Okinawa was a weaponless kingdom. And the guy looks through all these forms and has his own theories, and rather than being like, perhaps this is the case, he is like, here you are using a human shield, it's definitely what it means. But the guy's history is quite fun to read, even if he jumps to conclusions a lot. One that I've been meaning to write an article or a series of articles about for a while is called Prometheus, the George Dillman story, by George Dillman. G. Dilly, my old nemesis. That's pretty arrogant for a memoir title, but when the Jack Slack story comes out, it's going to be called Son of God. Or was it Rick Mail called his? It was like bigger than Jesus. And then another interesting sort of not technical karate book. You might struggle to get it nowadays. It's a book called, to be honest, a lot of the books that I mentioned are hard to get nowadays. There was a comment on one of my reading list videos that was like, Jack, mate, these books are all 200 quid or more. And I was like, oh, sorry, I got them a while ago. But I mean, I got this one for like 15 quid. But The Heart of Karate Do by Shigeru Igami, which I think I mentioned quite a bit. It's mainly this guy's journey to find out how to have a truly powerful punch. Because in karate, if you've trained any karate, there is this idea of what's called kime, which means like decision or focus or something like that. If you win a sumo match, you win it with the kime waza, a kime technique, deciding technique or whatever, culminating technique. And in karate, kime came to be like a full body tension on the end of techniques. So when you watch karateka trumping up and down the dojo, they're all like, and they look constipated, basically. And basically, Igami's discovery was that makes you slower, and if you're actually tensing all your muscles, you're slowing down your movements. But his journey is a little bit more interesting than that, and the book was written about the time he was just starting to sort of become a cult leader, so well worth a read. But it has some really... It's one of those ones where you agree with the guy's entire thought process, but what comes out the other end looks completely different to what you would think. So you're looking at his students and you're going, Jesus Christ, what is this mess that they're doing? And you can see how it would be their interpretation of the stuff that he was saying in the book, but your interpretation would look nothing like that. Yeah, well, that's a bit much on that one. We'll carry on. Hope that helps Ryan and Eddie. Hi, Jack. I often hear MMA pundits justify a clear mismatch by hyping the underdog's puncher's chance, which is the supposed possibility that one lucky punch or submission could end the fight at any time. While this seems logical, in reality, it has been extremely rare for a demonstrably inferior fighter to defeat a superior one. The only ones I can think of are Matt Serra over GSP, Sokoju over Arona and Little Nog. Almost every other shocking upset, such as Verdum over Fedor and Weidman over Silva, are proven over time to only be shocking in terms of the betting odds at the time of the fight. Indeed, when an inferior fighter does land a lucky attack, such as Vitor Belfort's armbar on John Jones or Shane Mosley's knockdown of Mayweather, the superior fighter always seems to recover and win the fight. Please share your thoughts. Thanks, Joey. Oh, good. Another chance to talk about Dan Henderson and Michael Bisping. Well, clearly a puncher's chance is a very real thing, but to make the most of a puncher's chance, the puncher has to create opportunities to land the punch, which in turn is being a better fighter than they are. If you taught Dan Henderson to cut the ring on people and land his right hand more often, or throw combinations properly, he would not be the fighter he was. That wouldn't be a puncher's chance. That would be a guy kickboxing with a wicked punch. I mean, obviously there are examples of guys just... It mainly happens when the other guy jumps into the one position where the other guy can beat him, or the guy with the puncher's chance can beat him. So, talking of the submission chance, Dennis Hall, Matt Hughes jumped into his guard twice and got submitted there. I think we would all agree that Matt Hughes is the more accomplished fighter and certainly the better fighter all round, probably. Dennis Hall, Dennis Hallman, can't remember. His nuts slipped out on TV, I remember that much, and then they got rid of him. Yeah, puncher's chance is just... it means that if the better fighter makes a mistake, he could get finished quite quickly. But if you're not knocked out outright, if you are the better fighter, you should know how to tie up, you should know how to survive, which Michael Bisping obviously did, and most other guys who have suffered that one big punch do, if they're significantly better fighter. I mean, I don't think you can ever count it out as a thing. This is like the story of writing about fights generally. I can't tell you anything that the fighters will do. I can tell you the stuff that they usually do and how that matches up against each other if they do the things that they usually do. If one of them comes out and does something different, I'm stumped. If one of them comes out and does something really stupid and loses, there was no way you could have predicted that. And that links in with why the MMA gambling game is so tricky anyway. You're going on, if both guys are in their right mindset and do their usual thing, if the two things match up so that one guy has a clear advantage that the other guy maybe wouldn't consider in their usual games, that's when you bet on one guy. And normally if the betting lines are favourable for that too. MMA is quite a good sport because you do get the guys who probably shouldn't be underdogs coming in as massive underdogs. I remember betting on Mark Hunt versus Czech Congo back in the day. I got 3-1 on that because I was like, Czech Congo's takedowns aren't very good. What's he going to do? Stand with Mark Hunt? But that was back when Mark Hunt had lost a few on the trot and was just sort of coming back. So nobody really gave it any thought. But now we're on to betting. Sorry. Yeah, puncher's chance. It sells fights. It sells bad fights. And for some people, and I found this out on my Facebook feed after the Henderson fight, some people could not care less about the whole fight. They want to know who came closest to finishing. Even if it's a 25-minute fight, it's who came closest to finishing. Which is all kinds of flawed because Floyd Mayweather was almost... Well, I suppose he wasn't almost finished at all, but Shane Mosley probably came closer to finishing Floyd Mayweather in one instance than Floyd Mayweather did throughout the entire fight. But you couldn't watch that fight from any angle and think that Floyd Mayweather wasn't in complete control and dominating. Treat it for what it is. It's a selling tactic. It justifies fairly shitty fights. But when you're struggling to get motivated to watch a fight, you can use it on yourself. I do this all the time. I have to write about the wrestler with the one big punch all the time. And sometimes it pays off. I mean, Tyron Woodley doesn't have much more than the big right hand and the takedowns that he very occasionally goes for nowadays. And some hard low kicks. But he is now the world champion because Robbie Lawler fell into one of those right hands. So the jury's out. I mean, the puncher's chance exists. It's just that if you don't knock a guy out outright, and he's a much better fighter than you, he should be able to recover. And most of the time he does. But sometimes you just need to get excited for Faber versus Cruz 3, 4, 5, whatever it is we're on now. Yeah. Hi Jack, the UFC has been adding more commentators recently, brackets Cruz, DC, to help delegate the load out better since Rogan has reduced his schedule. I'm curious, what are some of the strengths and weaknesses of the current crop of commentators from that you notice while watching the broadcast? Feel free to talk about the commentators outside the UFC too. Cheers, from Josh. I think Cruz and DC, I've only seen them or heard them once. Cruz I really enjoyed, but what the CME said about him was that he seemed like a guy who'd been waiting for years for that chance and then had to say everything at once. And he did just talk constantly throughout the fights. But he did a really good job. If I had to criticize something about Cruz's performance, it was that he did throw in a lot of the cliches that people are familiar with. It seemed like he was just giving the audience something that they knew so that he could get back to talking about the interesting stuff about the fights. So he'd tell you about what some guy was doing that was interesting and say if this guy starts doing this, then that'll be interesting to see how that matches up. And then he'll go, but you can't forget, it's down to who wants it more. And you're like, Dom, I don't need you to tell me that, man. You're here because you're a martial arts genius. We don't need you to repeat the spiel that Goldberg and Anik and people like that can do on their own. But, that's pretty much my only criticism. I really enjoyed that, actually. I quite like his voice, too. He's soft-spoken. I appreciate that. DC was good, too. I like listening to Brian Stan, Kenny Florian, people like that. I think the main problem with any commentating is that you have to be sort of fake excited a lot, and you can jump the gun. So the one that they're always criticizing is whenever a submission looks almost locked in, every commentator will say, "Oh, it's over now," and then the guy will get out. But I have massive respect for the commentators, even Goldberg, who is objectively not very good at his job and still there. So I don't know why that is. But massive respect for commentators because being in the arena is very, very different to watching from at home. And the example that I always think of when I'm thinking of this is that I was in the arena for Rosie Sexton versus Jessica Andrade. And you'll remember that Rogan was like, "Stop this fight, it's a massacre." And then afterwards, Rosie Sexton was like, "No, it wasn't." And a lot of people were like, "Actually, it wasn't as bad as Rogan was making out." And that wasn't Rogan making it out. I was there live. And the crowd were absolutely dead because the local ass was getting beaten from pillar to post. And I feel like the atmosphere among the crowd affected how I saw the fight, because I was turning to people and going, "This fight should probably be stopped, right?" But watching it again on TV later, I was like, "Oh, it wasn't that bad." She was getting beaten up, but it wasn't unanswered punches, hands down by sides, dying sort of thing. So being there and calling the fight accurately while you're amid the action, very, very tricky to do for anyone, even guys who've been doing it for years and years and years. The one thing I do wish that they do, move to the 3-man commentary team. Or more. You could have 4. Nobody is struggling that much with multiple voices. If you hear, I think it's HBO with Jim Lampley and Max Kellerman, and I think they have George Foreman in there, or Roy Jones normally. Works really well. It's great having 3 guys on the team. One guy can't keep it all going constantly. You can't have one really talkative guy in the analyst all the time because there'll be breaks in the action, or guys just talking when they don't need to. If you've got 3 guys, you can always go "What are you thinking about this?" and then bounce ideas off of each other. One of my favourites, actually, is I think it was Stephen Quadros, Bas Rutten, and Maurice Smith, commentating the Sakuraba-Royce Gracie fight. And because that fight, there was not a lot going on. It was a really grueling endurance match. And it's just the 3 of them talking about this pamphlet they've got in front of them with the rules on. And they're going, "Is that against the rules?" And then they're talking about old fights that they had and things like that. It's really fun. A 3-man booth would work well, I think. I think if you got the color guy, Rogan, and a fighter, or 2 fighters and Anik, or 2 fighters and Gooden, or they've got so many good guys, and they're wasting them all because they can only do a couple of shows each because you are only giving 2 guys the chance at any one time. If you just mixed it all up, you'd get really interesting combinations. So that's all I have to say about that. Right, I've prattled on for a while now. There's nothing going on this weekend, as far as I know, but then the Glory card snuck up on me. I'm not breaking down any preview stuff today. We'll start doing the interesting stuff next week. We'll have... I'll probably start with McGeary versus Davis, and then I'll do Dos Anjos versus Ferguson and all that stuff. And then we'll start ramping up towards 205, the big one. Remember to subscribe to the Patreon. We're going to have a new history episode coming out very soon. Mendoza and all that stuff. Subscribe on YouTube so that you know when these come out. And send your mail to fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. I am Jack Slack. You are my listeners. Cheers.